Welcome to the InSITE 2020 webinar. My name is Meredith McKinley. I'm a consultant to the Regional Arts Commission. I have a company called Via Partnership. We work with communities across the U.S. to develop and implement public art strategies, and it's our honor to be working with RAC and the Downtown STL Public Art Initiative to help manage this call for artists. I'm going to be talking in this first part of the webinar about just the basics around InSITE 2020 and the Downtown STL Public Art Initiative, and then I'm going to be handing things off to my colleagues at MAPS. So what we're going to be covering today, again, is background on the initiative, the InSITE 2020 project, applicant qualifications and the review process, the selection criteria, and then the application components. And then MAPS will be covering the other part. So a little bit about the Downtown STL Public Art Initiative. It's a collaboration between the Regional Arts Commission, Downtown STL, and Explore St. Louis. The initiative grew out of the Downtown Public Art Plan that was developed over the course of about 12 months and was adopted by the RAC Board of Commissioners in October of 2018. Through that planning process, a host of downtown stakeholders as well as regional stakeholders were engaged through surveys, workshops, meetings, and other input to imagine a vision for public art downtown, identify opportunities, and strategies for implementation. The full plan, as well as the executive summary for the Downtown STL Public Art Plan, can be found at this website below vision.racstl.org/downtown. I'm not going to talk extensively about the initiative, but I do want to focus a little bit on the vision, because the vision, I think, is important in understanding the InSITE 2020 project, as well as some of the goals behind it. So the Downtown STL Public Art Initiative has a vision to advance public art downtown that will support building a dense, inclusive, and culturally vibrant downtown that is a vital anchor to the entire St. Louis region. The projects of the initiative aim to encourage walking and exploration of downtown street and public spaces. So this is one of the things that we heard most in our engagement process around the plan, was that people are really interested in the role that public art can play in encouraging people to get out of their cars and get out on the street and walk around, or when they're coming downtown for an activity, to stick around and linger and explore. The second aim is around creating a place for creativity and possibility. There's a lot of really interesting things happening inside those office buildings downtown, and there's artist studios downtown. There are lots of cultural organizations, but sometimes you wouldn't know it by walking down the street. So we're thinking about the role of public art and letting people know that there's lots of creativity happening in downtown, but also that downtown is a place of possibility. If you're an artist or a creative and you have an interesting idea that you want to implement, downtown is a place that's open and receptive and a great place to do that. Reinforcing the identity of downtown as a heart of a diverse and multifaceted region. This really underpins the idea that downtown belongs to everybody. It's where we gather, when we celebrate, when we mourn, when we protest. It's a place that we want to sort of reinforce, includes narratives that is inclusive of the entire region. And finally, really welcoming people downtown. The public art can let people know that they've arrived in a place that's unique and vibrant and creative, with a rich history, with people from all over, and that they're encouraged to gather. The initiative, which was launched at the beginning of 2019, after the adoption of the master plan, has that vision, and then it really is doing these three key things. One is It's providing the leadership and capacity to lead public art projects. So this InSITE 2020 is one of the projects that we'll be leading. The initiative will also partner with other downtown stakeholders to launch and manage projects and act as a resource for developers, property owners, community organizations, arts organizations, and artists that are interested in initiating their own projects. So now to the call. So InSITE 2020 is one project of the Downtown STL Public Art Initiative. There will be others coming, but this is our first. We're very excited about it as the first. The basic idea behind InSITE 2020 is that one of the ways we describe it is an ideas competition. Most public art commissions, if you're familiar with or have ever applied for a public art project, are very prescriptive in that they have already identified a site and a set of goals and a budget for a project. And we were interested in this particular opportunity and sort of turning that traditional model upside down. And instead of being so prescriptive, to ask artists to come to us with their ideas for the kinds of places that they'd be interested in engaging with artworks that are based upon their own ideas and artistic practices, and that we're allowing for a budget range of between $5,000 and $30,000 to allow for a range of scales of projects. So again, InSITE invites artists to share and develop ideas for site-specific temporary public artworks in the downtown core, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're defining that geography that impact how we see downtown. That again, thinking about that site or InSITE as the title, we're interested in how the artist sees downtown or how downtown is perceived. So it could be thinking about how we see downtown in terms of its physical spaces, its views and sightlines, but it also could be around how people actually view or perceive downtown. And that ultimately what we also would like for these projects to do is encourage exploration, curiosity, and a new way of seeing. It's also important to emphasize that there is a strong interest in work that is site-specific. So this is a commissioning process. We're not interested in citing existing work for this particular opportunity, but we're interested in artists that have ideas for work that hasn't been created yet, that is responsive to both this call and to their own experiences and observations around downtown, and that the works must be temporary. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we're defining temporary as well. In terms of being public, we're looking at publicly accessible spaces. Those would be outdoor spaces where you don't have to have permission. So typically not the insides of buildings. I think the one exception would be the Metrolink stations, which are sort of enclosed spaces but are still public. So how we're defining our space. This is downtown, our limits for this particular call. And again, the overall initiative, the geography is a much broader definition of downtown. It goes all the way to Jefferson and goes much further to the north and south and all the way to the river. But for this call, because we're interested in having a critical mass of work in a highly walkable part of downtown, we are looking at Tucker Boulevard on both sides of Tucker to the west, both sides of 4th Street to the east, Convention Plaza, which is also is Del Mar when you head further west, to the north, and then Market Street to the south. And you'll note on this map, and this map is also in the call for artists, that we have cut the City Garden out of this, but the other parts of the Gateway Mall are considered spaces. That's not because we have anything against City Garden, it's just that we figure they've got the public art thing covered pretty well. So we're interested in those spaces for the call. You will note in here in the call, and this is again called out in the written materials, public spaces could include parks, streetscapes, transit stops, any other city or government-owned sites. Those would be preferred. However, if you have an idea for a non-public site, so on private property, on the site of a building, or in a private property owner's right-of-way, we will be open to that. If you're selected as a finalist, we can work with you to secure that permission. Just a few other things to think about. One is just considering how the site is used, pedestrian flow, safety, and then also our goal to encourage walking and exploration. In terms of how we're defining temporary, the works can range anywhere from 1 month to 1 year. While the timelines are flexible, all the projects should be on display during the entire month of May in 2020. This is so that we have a month of celebration to celebrate these projects, but the works could go in earlier or stay later and have a much longer duration. For phase 1, we're going to ask in the application, which you'll see, you'll be asked to check a box related to the potential budget range of your project. But you're not being asked at this point to submit a detailed budget. So this is just going to be an estimate. If you are selected as a finalist and your actual budget when you start to get into the project differs from what you put in your estimate in this phase 1, that's okay. But we just kind of want to get a sense of the scale of the budget that you're thinking about in terms of your idea. When you're thinking about that budget number you're going to check, you should think about design, you should think about your time, and that would be, you know, both your sort of design fee as well as your time in the actual project management and creating the work itself, supplies, insurance, engineering, fabrication, delivery, installation, and de-installation. So you'll be responsible for de-installing the work and, if necessary, returning the site to its original condition. And then if there's any travel, that as well, or shipping. If you're selected as a finalist, you'll be asked to submit that detailed budget in phase 2. So here's the phase 1 submission deadlines. We have a deadline for the applicant questions is May 9th. That's so that we can compile all the questions that you have and then post those online. The submission deadline for this phase 1 is May 19th. And then by late June, our selection panel will have selected up to 10 finalists. Those finalists will be paid an honorarium to develop a final proposal. And that final proposal, then, that timeline is outlined below for phase 2 of the project. So if you are selected as a finalist, you'll be asked to put your full proposal together and present that sometime in September. And then we would make a final selection and go through all of the approval processes through the end of this year so that you can move into detailed design and fabrication. Eligibility. The eligibility for this project is it's open to established and emerging artists who have a connection to the St. Louis region. So this goes beyond just pure residency. So clearly, if you live in St. Louis you are eligible, but if you've lived here at any point in your life, you're eligible. If you attended school here, you're eligible. If you taught here, you're eligible. If you've had some kind of meaningful experience related to your art practice here in St. Louis, you are eligible for the project. So, you know, I've been asked a lot of questions about the eligibility. I think another way of thinking about it is if at any point in your lifetime you felt like that St. Louis was your community, then you are eligible. And there'll be a question on the application that just asks you very simply to explain that connection. So that final bullet point really just emphasizes that your commitment and interest to St. Louis, that feeling of belonging in terms of the community here, is more important than simply just residing here. We are open to artist teams applying. If your artist team has a non-local artist, that's fine, as long as at least 50% of the team has that St. Louis connection. No previous public art experience is required. So if you've done a public art project in the past, that's great, but if you haven't, that's great too. We would love to work with artists that have not had experience, as well as that have had experience doing public art projects. And then finally, if you were a student, you are more than welcome to apply, as long as all of the other eligibility requirements are met. We just ask that your proposal or your idea not be something that you are creating as part of your coursework in school or under the supervision of a teacher or professor. We have a Downtown Public Art Advisory Committee. It's our standing committee for the Downtown STL Public Art Initiative. They will be acting as the reviewers or the jury for this project. There are 8 of them. And they're all arts and design professionals. Some are also downtown residents and business owners. They include a curator, gallerist, architect, landscape architect, designers, and arts advisors, and all are based in St. Louis. So what the committee will be looking for, again, this is the criteria that comes directly out of the call. So it's really, again, both about the artistic excellence and innovation of your work as evidenced by your portfolio that you'll be submitting, as well as your idea. And so the idea part of the project, and we're not asking for full proposals here, we're not asking you to actually sketch or draw or render an actual idea, but we want the written idea, and that written idea will be an important part of the selection process. So again, for that phase 1, the committee is looking for one idea, not, as I just said, not a fully formed proposal, and it can have multiple sites or elements or dates, but it all should be part of that unified concept. And so here what you see, the applications must all be submitted on cafe or callforentry.org, and all of the details for getting logged into that are in the call. But here you see, this is just one page from the call. All of these questions are sort of asked with a word count. And Bridget from MAPS will be going through that in the second half of this webinar.